Erik McKinney here with Darrell Rideaux. We are fresh off USC's 30-23 victory over number 10 Utah. Darrell, the last time we stood here, we talked about a USC backup quarterback throwing for more than 350 yards and 3 touchdowns against a good Pac-12 team.
Right.
Let's do it again. The first time it's Kedon Slovis over Stanford. Right now, Matt Fink comes in after the second play of the game. Kedon Slovis takes a huge shot. He's out. Fairly obvious, right away that this was gonna be turned over, to Matt Fink for the duration. He comes in and they ask him to throw the ball right away. Your thoughts on kind of Matt Fink's overall performance and really the fact that they talk about no matter who the quarterback is the offense. Yeah. And that's what we saw today. They could not really get a running game going, so it was on Matt Fink's arm and he delivered.
Erik, before I can get settled in my seat, lo and behold, like you talked about, another quarterback down. And just when I thought that this was a program that couldn't withstand another injury like that, considering on the depth chart to start the season, Matt Fink was damn near 4th on the depth chart. Maybe Jack Sears was, but in reality, it was a distant 2nd and 3rd between the two of them. When you think about the play of Kedon Slovis and how this team, this coaching staff, trusted Slovis. Now he goes down. Fink comes in and you really didn't know what to expect of him. I couldn't tell you because I haven't seen enough of his body of work. But this is more of an indictment on the system itself and how and what they ask and they call of the quarterback to be more of a distributor. But when Fink came into the game, it was clear that he was very comfortable with what his role was and what was expected of him, and he went to work. And he got into a rhythm, got into a groove, and really just took advantage of the matchups. And that's the one thing that we're constantly saying about these quarterbacks, exploiting and identifying the matchups with their key receivers. In particular, Michael Pittman Jr. When this team needs a big play, they've identified who their number 1 target is.
Yeah, look, we got to say kudos to Matt Fink. This is something where he was on his way out in the transfer portal looking at other schools. He stays here because he thinks maybe I'll get that moment.
Yeah.
He got that moment tonight and he absolutely delivered and he played like that. You talk about kind of taking advantage of matchups. Yeah. He knows who his wide receivers are. Yeah. He knows, look, when in doubt, I'm putting it up to them. Yeah. That's not something we saw USC try against BYU. That's something where, again, Matt Fink comes out and he's kind of playing with house money at that point. Yeah. Let me throw it up to these guys. Let me try Michael Pittman down the sideline on some fades and into double coverage and let me try that.
And there were some moments that, and again, if we are giving as much credit as he deserves, Matt Fink, the athleticism that he showed. There was one play where it felt like he kind of pirouetted out of a would-be tackler, maintains his composure, and finds Amon-Ra St. Brown for a touchdown on a play that really just felt like he threw up a 50-50 ball, a Hail Mary between 2 defenders. That is the magic of Fink. In a game where USC could have gone either way. You're going up against a top 10 team that hadn't won in the Utah as a program hasn't won in the Coliseum since 1916. And this was a team that was looking to really kind of establish a sense of dominance and kind of take a stranglehold of the Pac-12 South. USC behind Matt Fink in a heroic effort of him. It wasn't a lot of plays. There were spurts where it felt like Utah maintained time of possession, but it was the chunk plays. Yes. It was the big moments that really ignited this Coliseum, and also I think it gave this team the confidence and the assurance that it can commit to its game plan, and it was going to be in good hands with Matt Fink.
And I think offensively, you have to maybe temper it a little bit. Look, this was a win that the program absolutely needed. There's going to be so much talk about Clay Helton's job moving forward and still Washington, Notre Dame coming up with back-to-back games there. And when you look at the run game, the offensive line, they just could not get anything going. That being said, when they needed to kill clock, when they needed to win the game, and in those situations, Clay Helton talks about it, every coach talks about it, can you run when the other team knows you're going to run? Yep. They could. It's not something where you're going to give this run game and the offensive line an A for the game.
Right.
But they were able to do enough, and I think it shows that USC still, that they were written off after BYU.
No doubt about that.
How can you not come away with that win? it shows, I think, that they still have a little kind of, the guts
they've
to play.
yet to play a full, complete game, and yet you leave just inspired that this team can do so much. Now, this does also speak to the maturation of this coaching staff. They didn't wait. They didn't concede to the fact that Utah was going to take away the running game. They went after it, and they exploited a passing game. When Pittman has 10 receptions for 232 yards and a touchdown, and all three of your primary receivers end up in the end zone, you needed those big plays from those type of players. But like you talked about it, when it came time to ice the game, they are clearly starting to define roles within that running back room. From Stephen Carr, Vavai, Malapai, but it's a Marquise Step. He appears to be the closer on short yardage. If you know you're not going to feature a fullback, you know that it's going to be very difficult to tackle him. So that short yardage package that they're featuring him is proven to be critical when you're looking to close out these games. Again, there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. But on a night when you went into a game plan thinking that you had Keaton Slovis and you were going to make some corrections from the BYU game, lo and behold, you had to alter the whole game plan and really play around the skill set of a Matt Fink, who probably came into this game not knowing if he was going to see one rep. There's no way you could have told me that he thought he would be playing full four quarters. But he let it go. He threw the ball. He put the ball into positions where his receivers can be successful on a night where they needed these big plays. Could not afford to be conservative.
Yeah, and I think, Matt Fink had a really tough interception.
Yeah.
That came at just such a bad time, and it felt like it gave Utah a 7-yard touchdown drive right after that, and it felt like that was the spark that Utah needed, and they were going to go, because Utah, against this USC defense, piled up yards in that first half. They came away with 10 points on drives that, 75-yard drives, 76-yard drive, 50-yard drive. They moved the ball so much against them. But the USC defense found enough. They found enough. They found enough to not contain Tyler Huntley in the backfield, but he's not scrambling constantly for 3rd and 12 conversions. They gave up enough to where you're still saying these are issues that have to be fixed going forward. But again, like I said, they found enough against Utah's offense.
But this is an offense, Utah, that's averaging over 30 points a game, very explosive. And coming into this game, we talked a lot about Zach Moss and Huntley as being the ones that you had to contain. Where I'm impressed with this defense is the game plan that they went into, they executed. They mitigated the chunk yards after contact, and they really forced Utah to be methodical and have to figure out ways to go down the field. The number one stat that stand out to me is 3rd down efficiency. At one point, I recorded Utah being like 3 for 9 and was really ineffective when they needed to be most. Despite them controlling the time of possession, it just felt like there were times where Utah collapsed. They became unglued. There is no reason whatsoever to seal the first half knowing that Utah is getting the ball back. You don't get into the end zone or at least settle for 3. Instead, you turn the ball over and you give USC life going into halftime. And I just really think that that's somewhat deflated Utah's whole mentality about how they were approaching this game. There were other times where I thought penalties kind of really derailed the flow of the game, but this wasn't a game where penalties were lopsided or anything like that. It really came down to USC's defense taking on the challenge, shorthanded. They lost some key players on defense, from Elijah Griffin. You name it. It just felt like next man up mentality. They really understood the game plan, and there were some tendencies that they were able to exploit that was true to form on film. I'm not certain that Utah was expecting USC to respond the way they did. Perhaps they thought losing to BYU, they'd come in a little deflated, but give a lot of credit. There's a lot of pride in that locker room, especially playing in the Coliseum.
Yeah, I think some things to point out. Utah loses Zach Moss early to a shoulder issue, so that was a benefit to the USC defense. USC defense lost Elijah Griffin, and let's not forget, USC lost their starting quarterback. So it was sort of a thing. You talked about the penalties. it felt like kind of everybody got dragged down into the mud in this game, where it really turned into that physical scrap that you expect from Utah. Tyler Huntley was running everywhere. He threw the ball well. He ran well. He took a beating from this USC defense. This was the first time, I think, in a while you saw a USC defense prepared to hit with an offense. You knew the Utah defensive line was going to come out and say, we're the best unit in this game. We're going to set the tone. And they did on that first hit early, but they didn't kind of control the game the way you feared.
And I thought offensively, for USC offensively, I thought that the center guard combination of USC was going to have problems at times against Utah's front four, because they're very stout, 6'5", 335 pounds plus, depending on what day or how many cheeseburgers they ate for the day. But they did just enough to chip and give Fink enough time to make those great plays. Defensively, yes, when you look at the stats, Utah had their way in terms of statistically putting up points, but I attribute that more to the time of possession that they had, less of the fact that those plays didn't really hurt them. Again, I talked about Utah at times. It felt like they were going east and west a lot, but it wasn't the situation where these were back-breaking plays. If Huntley was going to beat you, I would rather see him rush for more yards than he passed for, because he was very ineffective. He only threw for one touchdown, and that touchdown, like you said, came at the hands of a short field. So whatever the game plan was that USC came in with, they executed to the best of their ability. Short-handed, whatever the case may be, I love the fact that they did rally, they grabbed cloth, and in crucial situations, they got penetration. When you needed the ball back most, who comes up? Your young true freshman, Drake Jackson, for a safety. And again, these are plays where you need these heroic opportunities from somebody who's going to step up and make the same type of plays that offensively you can expect from the wide receivers.
Yeah, I think like we sort of mentioned, overall, a ton of positives to take from this game. Some things where, okay, we still need to progress a little bit. This is game 4 of the season, and so much of how we feel and how USC fans feel about this season is tied to last season, where you wanted to turn the page completely and just start off running. You're dealing with now your number 3 quarterback coming in. You're dealing with, like you mentioned, some true freshmen playing, some injuries. I think in a game like this, where Utah came in favored, not a lot of teams come into the Coliseum as the favorite. USC found themselves in a physical fight, and they came out with a win. And I think at this point, coming out of this game, it's you really have to stress the positives, because USC really did rise up. And it was another game where they get out to an early lead, and it feels like here comes Utah's momentum is just snowballing after we mentioned that Fink interception. The fact that they can pick themselves back up, the fact that they can deliver kind of the punchbacks, I think is a good sign for them going another tough game next week at Washington.
But Erik, here's what I will say, okay, to all of us USC fans who have the aftertaste of last year. It feels like liver when you think about this coaching staff eating liver and that aftertaste that you feel. It's hard to get that taste out of your mouth. But right now, we're not eating liver. This team has the potential of being a main course steak meal if we just learn to embrace and appreciate it. But it's very difficult to appreciate a team that's really starting to gel and come together when after 4 games, we still don't know the makeup and identity of this team, because they've won sloppy, they've won big, and they've lost a game that they should have won. But it took multiple interceptions, fumbles, in overtime to beat a team that's still finding itself. So let's keep that in a perspective. Now going on the road against Washington, we'll see how they did against BYU. But I'll tell you this, I've always said this about Washington, they have a glass jaw. And if there's any team that's built to last and built to go into that stadium and beat them, it's this team. But which team will show up? The team that was ignited and rallied behind Matt Fink, or will Matt Fink come back to life? Let's see how he prepares this week and how this team reacts to playing behind yet another new leader at quarterback.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, no word yet on if Keaton Slovis will be available for that Washington game. That's obviously going to be sort of the biggest news as it plays out. But kind of a final point here, I think what this game also shows you is what we talked about a lot during spring, during fall. In this offense, you had 4 quarterbacks that could play.
Right.
And now we've already seen the 3 guys that are still here. They've all performed well in this offense. Now, if it is Matt Fink at Washington, Washington is going to have tape, and they're going to come in. So how does USC respond? But sitting here at 3-1, beating Utah and Stanford so far on this season, and this is a win that Clay Helton and his team are going to celebrate. They get an extra day this week, having played on Friday night, so we'll see if they can take this momentum up to Seattle. That was our look at USC 30, Utah 23, a big win for the Trojans in the Coliseum. For Darrell, this is Erik McKinney, WeAreSC.